Good morning, fabulous fourth grade. Today is April the 23rd, 2020, and it is a thoughtful Thursday. We are going to continue with our online learning in our virtual classroom. All right, I'm going to share the screen. Again, good morning, fabulous fourth grade. All right, so today we're going to continue learning about biodiversity. Our learning goal, my turn and your turn. I can identify the components of an ecosystem and identify and explain each level of an energy pyramid. Again, I can identify the components of an ecosystem and identify and explain each level of an energy pyramid. So what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is the variety of life in the world or in a particular habitat or ecosystem. An ecosystem is all of the living and non-living parts of an environment. Now, an environment is all of the living and non-living things around an organism. More than one of the same type of organism is a population. Okay, so to better explain that, we have one deer, and then we have another deer. So that one deer would be just an organism, but more than one of that same type of organism is a population. Now, when you have at least two populations in an area, you call those communities because it's more than one type of organism. Then when you have multiple organisms of multiple communities in an area and they interact with each other, then that's the ecosystem, right? So last week we learned that plants make their own energy source, glucose, through photosynthesis. But what about animals? How do animals get energy? So our essential question for the week is, how do animals get their energy? And we're going to investigate that in Google Classroom. We talked about it briefly, how animals get their energy, and we created a energy pyramid together. And so I'm going to make a bigger energy pyramid and just build on that idea just a little bit more. Right. So at the very bottom, we said that producers made up the base of the energy pyramid. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a moment. All right, there we go. So we said that producers were at the bottom of the pyramid and they have the most energy stored, which is the glucose. So and producers get their energy from the sun. So I'm going to put a little sun over here. Just going to make it kind of orange for you to see. And so they get their energy, they get sunlight energy. Just a little yellow on the inside. All right, so the producers get their energy, and the producers, which are plants, we talked about cactus being a plant, we talked about trees being plants, and we talked about the grass being plants. And so the organisms that eat the producers, we call those primary consumers because consume means to eat something. So a primary consumer, if I was to call it by another name, then I would call it an herbivore. All right. And so then the next level of consumers would be the secondary consumers. Well, let's go with blue. Let's go with blue. Now, the organisms that would be secondary consumers could also be primary consumers. And we'll write them in purple. And that would be the omnivore, or the omnivore could be here. All right. So omnivores they eat producers, and they also eat other animals. But then only herbivores eat producers. So herbivores can be primary consumers, or omnivores can be primary consumers. But herbivores cannot be secondary consumers. However, omnivores can be secondary consumers because omnivores can also eat herbivores. Now, an organism that only, let's go with green again. All right, an organism that eats secondary consumers would be a tertiary consumer. A tertiary consumer could be an omnivore, but typically a tertiary consumer is a carnivore. All right. And then there was one more that I wanted to share with you guys. It would, now you could go another level with consumers, but we're not going to do that for 4th and 5th grade. However, there is another trophic level that I want you to, they're very, very important. Maybe not as important as the producers, but they're very, very important. And I want you to become familiar with them as well. I guess I'll use this black. Use a darker green. All right. So at the very, very top, we have the group of decomposers. The decomposers are different because, all right, so they're different. So I'm just going to say, we call them decomposers, but with decomposers, we have the detrivores. And so with the detrivores, we have the group of decomposers. And then we also have the fungi and bacteria. Right? And so the decomposers would be the scavengers and any other animal. So here you would have like the mushroom, you would have any type of bacteria that breaks down the dead or decaying matter. And then here you would have the maggots, the earthworms, you would have the flies, but then the scavengers, which fall up under decomposers, would be like the vultures, the jackals, anything that comes along and eats a dead organism that's already been, that's already died. And so the fungi and bacteria would break it down. The flies, the maggots, they would further break it down. The scavengers will pick at it and eat it. You'll see them on the side of roads. As you're driving, you'll see a bird come down and maybe pick up an animal that's been hit by a vehicle. And they would take pieces of it and they would eat it. And as they're taking pieces, they're clawing through it, further breaking down the decaying matter. And so these are the detrivores. We don't talk about detrivores so much in 4th grade, but you know I like to expose you to material that I know that you're going to need as you get older. And so again, I'm going to come back up and I'm going to write omnivore by the tertiary consumer, because sometimes an omnivore could be a tertiary consumer as well. So these are our trophic levels. We fit here, here, and here, we don't necessarily break down dead material. However, we are here, primary, secondary, tertiary consumers. And the plants make up this largest group. As each organism consumes another organism, so as a primary consumer consumes the producer, their energy, a portion of their energy goes to the primary consumer. As the secondary consumer consumes the primary consumers, a portion of their energy, about 10% of it, goes towards the secondary consumer. And as the secondary consumer is consumed by the tertiary consumer, a portion of their energy goes to the tertiary consumer. So how we consume other organisms to get energy. So like when we eat a salad or when we eat a hamburger, we're consuming that organism to get energy. And then the tertiary consumer, we're going to stop the energy pyramid at the tertiary consumer. It's broken down. Some of it is consumed by the decomposer, but it's broken down. As it's broken down, that energy is absorbed in the soil as minerals and through the plant's roots. And so the energy cycle, it starts over again. So, and we'll draw an arrow indicating that. So when the producer gets water from the soil, those minerals that we talked about last week doing photosynthesis, those minerals are actually from the decomposer, and it could have been from other plants and that have been decomposed, broken down, and being the matter from the plants is being reabsorbed through the roots. So all of this is how animals get their energy. We're going to further our investigation in Google Classroom. I'm going to share the screen again. All right, so we're going to further our investigation in Google Classroom. Again, we're still learning more about how animals get their energy. In Google Classroom, I'll start with Notre Dame. You'll go to the classwork tab. From the classwork tab, you will look for the biodiversity topic and today's date. If you are in Chicago, you will go to the classwork tab, look for the biodiversity topic, today's date. And if you are in Michigan State, the Spartans, you will go to the classwork tab, look for biodiversity, and then today's date. Once you get to today's date, you're going to view the assignment, go to the instructions. If you're not directly taken to the instructions, we always begin our lesson out reviewing our fab vocab. Jalen Athena has been knocking me out of my position. All right, so let's start from the beginning. I'm going to study them again. Ms. Davis goes through the vocabulary every day. Just because I like to be familiar with what I'm teaching you. All right, so our first word, my turn and then your turn, ecosystem. So the ecosystem is the living and non-living parts of the environment in a specific area. Ecosystems can be really small or they can be really large. So outside in my backyard, there's some water. And anyone that is familiar with the dirt knows that, well, some parents say don't go outside with your shoes off because there's bacteria in the soil and there's puddles of water outside. If I was to take a sample of that water and put it on a petri dish that goes on, a slide that goes on actually grow it on a petri dish and then swab the petri dish and prepare a slide to put under a microscope, I could see a small habitat of microorganisms living from that puddle. If I was to go to the Memphis Zoo and just walk around casually, I would see different habitats of organisms. I would see the gazelle with the ostrich because they have a relationship that we'll talk about next week. I would also see maybe all of the big cats together. In our slide, we saw the mountain lion and the deer They have a relationship that we're also going to talk about next week. And so these are all of the animals living together here in the city. And then the organisms like that pond of water and the puddle of water in the backyard. Now, in larger ecosystems, we have the desert ecosystem, we have the tundra, we have the coniferous, we also have the deciduous forest. Memphis is a deciduous forest because it has trees that are classified as deciduous, right? So all of the ecosystems have things that allow you, or features that allow you to recognize them as ecosystems. But the most important thing that they have is they have living and non-living things interacting with each other. All right, environment. All the living and non-living things that surround just an organism. So when we looked at this picture, we saw all of these individual organisms, and then there were some individual organisms in the water. And all of these organisms, the plants and the animals, everything around a specific organism like this fish would be its environment. Everything around this deer would be its environment. Everything around it looks like a ladybug right there would be its environment. All right. Our next term, my term, producer, your turn. So a producer is an organism that makes its own food through photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process used by plants and other autotrophs. Those are animals that make their own food. If you're a heterotroph, then you go out and you consume other organisms. You don't make your own food, you consume other organisms. But if you're an autotroph, then you make your own food. So photosynthesis is a process used by plants and other autotrophs to capture light and energy and use it to power chemical reactions that convert carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and energy-rich carbohydrates, which is glucose, such as sugars and starches. A consumer. So a consumer is an organism that must eat or consume plants or animals for food. We talked about these consumers, the tertiary, the secondary, and the primary, and that how omnivores can fit into all of the levels of consumers. All right. Herbivore. Herbivore. It is an organism that only eats plants. So which consumer is which consumer? Well, it's the primary consumers, the herbivores. All right. Omnivores. I'm an omnivore. You're an omnivore. We're omnivores together. So an omnivore is an organism that eats both plants and animals. Omnivores. And then here are omnivores. The bear eats berries, and it also eats fish. And the bird eats berries, nuts, and also sometimes worms, sometimes mice, just whatever they can, even snakes. All right. Carnivore. So an organism that only eats meat or other animals. A lion is a carnivore. My cats, Taco and Tequila, are carnivores. Some birds of prey are carnivores. Now, there are some birds, like we just said, that eat berries and they eat nuts, but they also eat worms. There are some birds of prey that only eat the mice or snakes or other animals. They do not eat berries. They do not eat nuts. Decomposer. A decomposer breaks down dead plants and animals. This returns nutrients to the soil. And that's what we were talking about up here, how the decomposer will take that dead or decaying matter from an animal. And as it breaks it down, it's reabsorbed through the soil, and the energy goes through the energy pyramid again. A habitat. Habitat is an environment that provides the things a specific organism needs to live, grow, and reproduce. Habitats can be as small as that puddle that I was talking about in the backyard, or it could be as big as swampland. All right. A food chain is a community of organisms where each member is eaten in turn by another member. This is a food chain. if I had specific organisms in here, it could be classified as a food chain. So at the bottom, I would put maybe grass. And here I would put primary consumer, a bunny rabbit or a winter hare. A secondary consumer would be an Arctic fox. Tertiary consumer would be the animal that would eat the Arctic fox. All right. And in some food chains will not have a tertiary consumer. They may have the producer, they may have the primary consumer, the herbivore, but then a carnivore or an omnivore would be the secondary consumer that would eat that herbivore, and then maybe it will get sick or it will get consumed or it would die just or of old age. Anything could happen, and then it would immediately skip this tertiary consumer and just be broken down by a decomposer where its minerals and nutrients would be reabsorbed in the soil by a plant. And then finally, food web. It is a community of organisms where there are several interrelated food chains. And so food webs are complex, but they all begin with the same energy source. It is the sun. All food webs, all food chains begin with the sunlight energy as the main energy source because the plants cannot produce glucose without the sunlight energy. So once we start with that sunlight energy as the main source of energy for all food chains, all food webs, then the plants have stored energy, which is chemical energy, glucose. And then after those plants are consumed by those primary consumers like this deer, like this rabbit, like this grasshopper, like this squirrel, then it's consumed by those secondary consumers. So the rabbit may eat from the bush, the shrub, but then it also may eat from the grass. But then it may get eaten by a snake or it may get eaten by a mountain lion. However, this snake could also get eaten by a mountain lion, but it may also get eaten by a hawk. So this is a food web. It's just a lot of interrelated food chains. All right, so once you finish going over your fab vocab at least two times, then Ms. Davis wants you to play the match game. And the match game just helps you become more familiar or acclimated with your vocabulary words. All right, so let's see. An environment that provides organism. Oh, that's no. It's this habitat. Okay, the community of organism where each member is eating in turn. That's a food chain. Everything, all the living, that is the environment. An organism that makes their own food is a producer. This is photosynthesis and herbivore. All right, so y'all see Jalen, right? 10.8 seconds. And Sanai, come on, Sanai. All right, and that looks like Zaya Ray. So the Promise Scholars are showing up and showing out. I'm loving it. All right, so I want you to play the matching game at least two times. Ms. Davis is not going to play again. However, we are going to go back to Google Classroom so that we can further our learning because I want you to be ready for 5th grade. All right, so after we do our fab vocab, then we're going to watch a video through BrainPop. I changed the password and the username. I made it something that I felt you guys would remember. It's so easy. It's right here. And they're actually the same thing. So the password and the username are the same thing. And all you have to do is look up in the instructions, and it's the same thing for Legends of Learning as well. And see, Ms. Davis is already logged in, and you're just gonna watch this video. The video is only about 2 minutes long. You're not going to do the quiz. But I have some thinking questions. I want you to watch the video at least 2 times. And so I have thinking questions. When you go back into Google Classroom, you see the Biodiversity Thursday. You're going to click that. After you click that, you'll have 3 thinking questions. And you just type the answer in any color that you want. And then make sure you see where the share button is. Make sure you click turn in. It'll have turn in up here. And you'll turn that in to Ms. Davis so that I can grade it. So here are your 3 thinking questions, and you'll get the answer from watching the BrainPop video. And then after that, you'll click biodiversity right here for Thursday. Answer your 3 thinking questions in whatever color you want. Make sure that it's not yellow. I can't see yellow. I just can't. So make sure that you answered in whatever other color other than yellow. And then here, touch turn in, click turn in. Go back into the assignment in Google Classroom, and then we have a ReadWorks. I do want you to complete the ReadWorks. It's not long. You will see grade 5 here because Ms. Davis does not teach down, and it's not that long, and it's everything that we've already talked about. After you read it, go to the question set, and then after you do the questions, you have 3 thinking questions where you have to actually write the answer in, you type it in, and then at the very, very bottom, you'll see a button that says submit. It'll be gray. You're gonna press submit, okay? And then that's it. That is it. I did put Legends of Learning in here in case you wanted to play one of the science games. I do have them in here for you. One, you build your own ecosystem. One, you build up an ecosystem. And the other one is talking about food chains and food webs, which we're going to talk more about next week. We may talk about them tomorrow, but that is it. So let's do a real quick recap. So we're going to study our fab vocab 2 times, and then we're going to watch the Brain Pop video using this username and password. They're the same thing. Then we're going to complete the thinking questions. If we can't remember the answer and we need to go back to the video, go back to the video. Ms. Davis gave you the username and password. So then after we finish our thinking questions, we are going to complete our ReadWorks, and we're going to answer all of our questions, including those typing in questions. Then we're going to press the gray submit button at the bottom of the screen. Then if we want, we can play the Legends of Learning, and it just gives us more experience with how an ecosystem actually functions. And so that is it. All right. So again, if you have any questions, we're available to you guys from 9 to 3 o'clock. Send a message through email, send a message on Class Dojo, or you can message me through Google Classroom. If you want to send a message through Google Classroom, make sure that you're sending it under today's topic, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Those messages come directly to my phone, so I will know if you send me a message. All right, I love you guys. Make sure you're logging into Compass Learning and doing your math or your reading. And make sure you're also logging into Zearn daily and doing your math. If you have any questions or you need me for anything, I'm here. All right, love you. Bye.